If I can throw this in really quick though, like I'm part of the Dune groups on Facebook. There are wonderful memes that come out of Dune groups, and I think it's time we as a culture admit you have to let things go a little bit. If they're going to make it from book to movie form, they're different forms of narrative. You can't possibly capture an entire book in a film, is what I'm going for. And people get really burnt out. They get burnt out on the films, and they have unrealistic expectations.
I think Lord of the Rings did it pretty well. Like they did pretty good.
But they're like 4 hours long now. In order to
Well, I didn't say they were short. Welcome back to Geek Channel 8. And today is our second anniversary show.
Woo!
Yes. 2 years. 2022 for me was the year of show trials. There was the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard thing where everything from like alpacas outside the courtroom to both like being found guilty in the end, like of defamation of each other. Basically, Depp won the lawsuit, but there was one countersuit claim of defamation that Heard won. So that was a crazy ass show trial, and it was riveting. That was from April 11th to June 1st. The very next day, the lawyers representing Alex Jones begged the judge to let them drop him as a client in the first of two defamation lawsuits versus Alex Jones, one in Texas and one in Connecticut. Before the trial had even really gotten rolling, Jones was immediately found in contempt for like not providing access to stuff, witnesses and other stuff. But then after withholding all this stuff, Jones's own lawyer accidentally sent the plaintiff the last 2 years of text messages incriminating Jones and contradicting his testimony. They were asking for like 45 million in damages. Jones's lawyers thought it would be reduced to $1.5 million based on caps on damages in Texas. The plaintiffs thought they would only get $4.5 million, but they got the full $45 million. In Connecticut, the jury awarded the plaintiffs a staggering $965 million. And not only did the judge not reduce the damages in that case, he tacked on a further $473 million in punitive damages, bringing it to over $1.4 billion, and ordered that Alex Jones not move his money offshore. Immediately after that, and I know it's not actually a trial, but the televised House Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack started. And in fact, only 2 or 3 days after the text messages were accidentally sent to the plaintiffs by Jones's lawyer, Congress requisitioned them and then eventually ended up subpoenaing Jones himself to testify before the Select Committee. So that was like trial, if we want to call it a trial, number 3. Like that was my most watched TV stuff.
I don't think we can talk about 2022 without talking about the war in Ukraine, which seems to have taken up the entire year, starting in the end of February. And maybe we'll get to this later, but in reading a recap of the war, in those end of year wrap-ups, one of the things that came up was that a major part of the Russian offensive against Ukraine has been cyber attacks, trying to take down their infrastructure. Ukraine, for most of December, and I think probably still now, has been struggling to keep the lights on and keep people warm. And that this has been a really, horrible, like disgusting strategy by the Russians. But what's interesting is the name of the cyber team is Sandworm. And this was all going down starting in April when we were broadcasting our Sandworm series.
I think that we would, being one to discuss movies on our podcast, we can't forget about the Oscar slap. I mean, That was all over the news. It was the Oscar slap, which, Will Smith went up on stage and slapped Chris Rock after he made jokes about Jada Pinkett Smith. And then later apologized for his actions. But, what's done is done. It goes down in infamy. It's one of the most historical slaps of 2022.
Yeah.
I had to bring that up.
After just railing against Alex Jones for about 10 minutes, I hate to do this, but my own personal conspiracy theory here is that was staged. Now, I don't want to get into it on this podcast, but I firmly believe that was at least allowed to air, if not staged, because even live shows, and I've worked in live television, you can hit a dump button and it dumps like stuff, so that it doesn't make it to air. That's how they prevent people accidentally saying the F-bomb or something like that. Years ago, that wasn't the case. And there was a streaker on stage at the Oscars who ran across the stage, and that actually made it on national television. It was a big scandal in the early 70s or something like that. But nowadays, like, someone from the audience would have to like make it past multiple layers, even the invited guests there that are all at tables, they have to make it past all the security people keeping people from going on stage to begin with, walk all the way up there. The cameramen have to be like pointed right at it, which they were, catch the whole thing on camera, and then allow it to air, and nobody in the editing room hitting the dump button or the cut to commercial, It's
because they were all hanging with the open mouths being like, what am I seeing?
They were busy picking their jaws up off the floor with that one. They're like, oh, well.
My favorite movie of 2022 and best sequel of 2022, which is Glass Onion, came out right at the end of the year. The sequel to Knives Out. That was my favorite movie of the year. And I want to give, as far as best sequel goes, I want to give an honorable mention to Top Gun Maverick.
I'll have to agree with you. Glass Onion is one that I did see, and it was so clever. You just don't know what's happening next. I love that they're doing this whole the Knives Out series. So I'm looking forward to seeing, what else they come out with.
Daniel Craig was less foghorn leghorny this time around. He tamped down that really bad Southern accent.
Oh, I forgot I did see Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. That was really cool too. That was a wild ride.
Yeah, I love Sam Raimi's take on that with the horror element. I am going to pick something also from much earlier in the year, which was Everything Everywhere All at Once. A wonderful sci-fi parallel universe masterpiece with one of the best mother-daughter storylines I've ever seen on film. And Michelle Yeoh is remarkable in it. It gives you kind of the best of her full acting range, everything from the action to loving and comedy. Just, she gets to really go to both extremes. And then Jamie Lee Curtis with the hot dog fingers. And then one last comment, which is, I think this is going to be the first film that is nominated for Best Picture where butt plugs are featured in a major unforgettable way. So between those things, that's my vote for Best Film of 2022.
Nice.
So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Best of the lobby.
So I'm going to introduce this by going into some of the snack trends of 2022. So this is compiled from all of the stuff I did working on the Let's Go to the Lobby segments of the show in 2022, what trended on TikTok, the Food Network, other places like that. The first one I'm going to mention here is charcuterie boards.
Oh, God.
Freaking everywhere.
They had a board for everything.
I got one marble and wood charcuterie board for a wedding gift. I got another ceramic one for Christmas. And then a subset of this is butter boards.
What?
Do you know what butter boards are?
I'm just
Yes.
picturing like that there's butter that's got hot honey in it, and there's butter like, it's that you have bread and then like 8 kinds of butter.
Sort of. The idea is, and this was a big trend in 2022, you take the board, the same board that you would lay out your meats and cheeses on or whatever, you spread it with a layer of butter, like a half inch of butter or something like that, and then you put all the toppings on it, like olives or cheese or whatever it is you put on top of butter, and then I guess you set the whole thing out. And that, I think the idea is that you use bread or chips or something to scoop this butter and toppings onto and eat it. Like,
Sounds amazing.
Wow.
That's like right up my alley. I love butter. It's terrible.
well,
I've been keeping track of signs that we are at the fall of the Roman Empire. This makes the top 10 hallmarks.
Well,
okay.
yeah, that and depression definitely contributed to the snack trends, because like people are doing snacks as meals now, which there were a lot of things that I saw on TikTok and Reels and things like that, where they were talking about, if you're depressed, you don't have to eat a whole meal. Just like throw some things together on a plate and just eat that, because then you're eating something, which is great advice.
Okay. Well,
but
that's
also it's like we're reverting back to when we were toddlers, and now we have plates full of snacks that we eat as meals.
and that is something I'm going to talk about here in a minute, which is a lazy cooking trend. The lazy cooking trend is a real thing. Like, what's the least amount of effort we can put into this? So the number one food trend on TikTok last year was cloud bread. Now, cloud bread, I don't even consider that to be bread. Do you know what cloud bread is?
No.
Cloud bread is you take eggs, cream cheese, and cream of tartar, and you bake that or whatever, and it's cloud bread. It's like super easy to make, so it falls into the lazy cooking trend. But also, I think some other things played into it this year, which is that global food prices were at a record high, and in particular, grains were the highest on record ever.
And American diets are really, really low on grains, and that's why we have stomach issues and dietary issues.
And
I digress.
Yeah, no, it's true. There's this ongoing gluten-free, low-carb keto thing going on. And so I think that plays into it too. So cloud bread was another big snack trend of 2022. Also, as more and more states legalize cannabis, now we have gourmet THC edibles, like restaurants actually producing, you name it, like THC drizzled fried chicken, like,
I'm ready to I'm ready to THC travel. Okay. Just saying.
There is so much gourmet THC edibles going on right now. The last one I want to mention is dirty sodas. So this started in Utah, where Mormons don't drink, and so they're essentially mocktails, and they're made with soda and then like a fruit syrup or puree, and then dairy, usually like half and half or milk or something like that. It's a big trend. There are like the equivalent of what used to be juice bars now that are dirty soda bars.
Juice bars.
But in a
that
lot
takes
of ways,
us back, doesn't it? Clubhouse days. What?
Yeah. In a lot of ways, this is a return to the way soda started, because soda started in pharmacies and drugstores, where they would literally mix it up to begin with, like before
when
they were
cocaine
bottled.
was in Coke.
Exactly. I mean, the malted milkshake was invented in Walgreens, in a Walgreens drugstore, back
Probably
when
made with Coke.
That's the malt, right?
Yeah, that's the malt.
If you look at the old advertising for Coke and Pepsi, the really old advertising, it's like, peps you up, helps you make it through the day and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh yeah, Yeah, I think
I'm
how
sure
hard
it
are we
does.
trying to hide the fact that this used to contain hardcore
Hard
drugs?
drugs.
Yeah.
Tell me your product includes hard drugs without telling me that your product includes hard drugs.
Okay. Favorite, let's go to the lobby segment of 2022. I'll go first. Mine was the roast suckling pig, which normally I try to make everything that we recommend on the show. I try to make it and eat it when I watch the film. This time I didn't do that. But in 2022, I did get to have roast suckling pig, an entire spit roasted pig over an open flame at a party in the summer. So I feel like I still accomplished the goal. My favorite to research how to exactly do that and prepare a roast suckling pig and everything that goes into that. Plus, we had David Keim on the show, and he was like throwing up pictures of Babe in the chat and stuff like that. So
I like the Sunday sauce from The Godfather. Could almost smell it while we were talking about it, and sort of tied that whole family theme in The Godfather that sometimes gets forgotten. Just the whole atmosphere of that dish seeping into the film was something I liked discussing, and then I made it like several weeks later, inspired.
nice. Speaking of mocktails, the thing for kids that had the little sand person stick with the Hershey's Kiss.
Oh yeah. Okay. So yeah, that is the worms in the dirt. That was the worms in the dirt, the dessert. Yes.
But with a
Yeah.
Tuscan Raider in it. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely one of my favorites because I pulled that from when my kids were in preschool.
You want to hear the stats for last year?
Throw up those
Yeah.
stats.
All right.
Go for
So the top 5 states I always exclude Vermont, New Hampshire, and Ohio, because that's where we're from and that's where we automatically get the most listens, So excluding those, number 5, within the US, the state where we were most downloaded is Kentucky.
Woot.
Number 4,
Yep.
Pennsylvania. Number
Nice.
3, New Jersey. Number 2, Virginia. And number 1, anyone care to guess?
I have no idea.
California.
Oh
California.
wow.
All right.
Yay. Well,
All right.
that's pretty cool. Kentucky makes sense. It's right across the river from where
Yeah.
I live. So
Yeah, I mean, Black and Bluegrass Roller Girl. So yeah,
I
get
mean,
it.
still, by the way, that's another great thing that happened in 2022. Black and Bluegrass Roller Girls had an undefeated season.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it was the best season ever, literally. For our end of season party, I even had ornaments made that said best season ever and gave them to all my teammates at the end of season party. That was a lot of fun. I got to MC that. It was a Western themed party, and I channeled my inner Dolly Parton and actually rented a costume from a costume shop. It was true.
Wow.
Yeah. I just love my team. Black Bluegrass Roller Girls forever.
Top 5 countries that we've been downloaded in, excluding the United States, because of course, far
We're
and
from
away.
here.
Yeah, far and away, the US has the most. Number 5 is too close to call, so I'm not going to say what that is. Number 4, Australia. Number 3, the UK.
Nice.
Number 2 is France, dropping to number 2 from last year.
France.
Although we've got a French film that we just did last week, so hopefully that'll boost us up in France again. And then number 1, Canada. So Canada has now taken the top spot
Canada.
outside the US as far as international downloads for us go. Most downloaded episode?
Don't you dare say Meet the Feebles.
Don't you dare say Showgirls.
I kid. This is the most downloaded episode. I don't have the stats for 2022 specifically. I only have for overall for the podcast. And so the most downloaded show overall for the podcast remains Skyfall.
Nice.
Skyfall is still in the top place, and it doesn't look like any other episode is catching up anytime quickly. So Skyfall is by far our most downloaded episode. Okay. What was your favorite and least favorite thing that we watched? And I'll start with Rosie on this one.
Okay. My least favorite that we watched, it was a close tie between Meet the Feebles and Showgirls because they were both pretty awful. Oh my God. I did it, I watched it. Showgirls I watched again, and I never want to watch that movie again. That movie is just the epitome of Hollywood, gratuitous imagery and no plot. I just never want to see that movie again. So that's my least favorite. Anyway, so back to more positive things. Of course, my favorite, I'm going to say my favorite is The Lord of the Rings because I picked it. That will probably forever be my favorite series of all time that we did was The Lord of the Rings. It was really cool. It's what we did with that, what we talked about, the guests that we brought in. David is just amazing. So yeah, that's my favorite.
I didn't think I had any innocence left to lose. And I discovered that there were some shreds remaining and they fell victim to Meet the Feebles. And I am forever changed. And if any of you out there watched the film because you saw it up on our podcast list, I am so sorry that you will now be walking down a path of darkness forever.
That's right.
I will say that Meet the Feebles is, if nothing else, unforgettable. You will not forget. There are things that cannot be unseen.
Yeah. They really should put that on a warning, like an explicit warning, cannot be unseen.
Okay, so
favorite movie that we watched would be Lone Wolf and Cub.
We watched two Lone Wolf and Cub movies.
Yes. I guess Baby Cart in the River Styx. Maybe that's my favorite one, but it was really cool having seen Mandalorian and loving it and then going back and seeing something that so clearly influenced it and was delightful in its own way and really kind of unique in the samurai genre. I was really stoked to have seen it, and I find myself talking about it all the time with other people who are into The Mandalorian and for whatever reason haven't seen it. It's something that I think about a lot and was really glad I'd seen.
My favorite movie that we watched in 2022. Well, it's hard to narrow it down to one movie, but the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the Peter Jackson trilogy, ranks among my all-time favorite movies ever. So Fellowship, Two Towers, Return of the King, it's really hard for me to separate them out into separate films. I think of it as one whole big long epic. So that is my favorite. Animal Instincts was my least favorite film that we watched, which is, yeah, I
it was so bad.
I'm just not going there. All right. So I want to contrast that with our favorite episode of the show that we did. For me, it was Color of Night. Comparing the characters on Color of Night to the characters in Basic Instinct was one of my favorite, most fun times that I had in the past year on the show.
I really enjoyed talking about Starship Troopers just because I'm personally interested in this question of satire as a force for good and sometimes as a force for evil, and Starship Troopers kind of landing in that, critics didn't know what to do with it. Is it pro-fascism? Is it anti-fascism? Like nobody knows. And the fact that Neil Patrick Harris is in it, of course, always fun, but I thought that was a great conversation. I had a lot of fun with it.
I really like digging into Gutland. It was a lot of great in-depth conversation that we had during that episode.
I have to agree with you on Gutland being one of our better episodes. Much like last week's episode, L'Argent, I think when we do these European art movies, they're really open to interpretation. It's really interesting seeing like your interpretation versus my interpretation versus Johanna's interpretation of those. Whereas, there's some that aren't as subtle. There's Meet the Feebles at one end of the spectrum, and there's Goodland at the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah. Yeah, we cover a lot of ground.
There's not a lot of, shades of meaning of the motifs in Meet the Feebles.
Right.
You're reminding me how much fun it was watching The Fourth Man. Actually, that was another one that was really, really fun to watch.
I'm giving you the behind the scenes reasons here for least favorite and most favorite. Least favorite, Lord of the Rings for the second year running, because that was the one where we had massive data loss and we lost some of our best moments, in my opinion, that we ever recorded on this podcast. I was able to reconstruct them, and I think they still came out pretty good on the air, but they were even better before that. And so live and learn, we now have multiple redundant backups going on. My second most favorite from a behind the scenes perspective episode that we did was driving to East Corinth, Vermont to research Beetlejuice and visiting the locations. That was very memorable. And then my number one most favorite, and it's not an episode, but we did a trivia night at Wolf Tree, a bar in White River Junction. Johanna and I hosted that in conjunction with the White River Indie Fest. And hopefully we'll be doing that again this year. I don't know yet, but
hopefully I can come.
yeah, we'll see if we can get you up here for that. Those two, from a behind the scenes perspective, were my favorite moments of the show from 2022. Let's take a listen to some of the highlights from this past season.
I'm really happy that I have the opportunity to do this. It feeds my need to entertain and to be on the air and to hear my own voice.
I want to hear what a 12-year-old boy's opinion of this film was.
So, I've got bad news.
So we start talking about it, and she's talking about the gratuitous nudity, teenage nudity, and I'm like, wait, I don't remember that.
Yeah.
No, we can't start the saxophone this early. That's the one complaint I have about all of these Basic Instinct ripoffs is how much bad saxophone music I've had to listen to.
If you're familiar with whenever Sean Bean puts on armor in a medieval type thing, something happens to him. Beetlejuice. If there's one thing that I've learned from this film, it's like everybody's like, let's meet on neutral ground and talk about this. Never do that, because that means somebody's going to get killed, right?
Space Marines.
Of course, red wine goes with everything Godfather.
No, wait, hold on. Let me clarify. Rape of the wife, murder of the children, not the rape and murder of children.
Thanks for clarifying that.
Someone pulled a Tyler Durden on The Rescuers, and it went unnoticed for 20 years.
If you ever wanted to see a film where you're just watching Gary Oldman sweat and have homoerotic dreams about Kevin Bacon, Criminal Law is the film for you.
They shot the scene, and apparently they all like flew into the lights, like, because they're like, it's kind of like moss and stuff like that. And they all like flew into the lights and died. Like,
oh my gosh.
And she's like, it was horrific.
That's terrible.
I'm sort of sorry that we didn't see Pink Floyd show up in the 1984 version.
I know. I come to the conclusion that Jawas are just dicks.
It was a really great season, and I look forward to what's coming next. We already have some good things in the can, so I hope you stay tuned. I hope you tell a friend and join our Facebook group, like and subscribe, write a little review, positive review, please. Because we love doing this, but it does take a lot of time, and we just do it from our heart. So thanks again, really, for giving me this opportunity, Eric, for real, because I love doing this show.
I love that you have allowed me to introduce my All Roads Lead to Gary Oldman mini segment into the show. It's very indulgent of you, and I appreciate it. And I'm going to take this time to plug a new Gary Oldman show that's on Apple Plus. If you haven't seen Slow Horses, he is magnificent in it. Absolute top Scary Gary form. Highly recommend.
Nice. Scary Gary form.
All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our second anniversary show. When we started this, we never knew we would even be a podcast. And then we never knew we would make it to our first anniversary, let alone our second anniversary. So thanks for another great year. I hope you guys stick around and invite other people to listen to our podcast. We got some interesting ideas in the pipeline. Until next time, this is Eric.
This is Rosie.
This is Johanna.
Signing off.